With a base now secured, John didn't immediately start recruiting. He knew people would come naturally, they would find the place, or he could invite them in during his supply runs. Broadcasting a message was an option, but he decided against it. John wanted to ensure that if someone inside the base got infected, it could be contained. He was in no rush to gather a large population. John first cleared out the entire 6th and 5th floors of the main building. He kept anything of value, burned the useless rest, then meticulously disinfected every room, preparing them for storage. He then secured and upgraded each room, locking down windows and reinforcing doors, ensuring he could control and monitor access to every part. He placed each area under surveillance, then spent time setting up a new, primary surveillance room, as well as his own personal quarters, on the 6th floor. He left the community's original security room intact but routed all feeds to his new command center, adding extra cameras at key perimeter points. Next, he began the great unpacking. He needed to clear room in his pocket dimension for future hoarding runs. Taking advantage of the base already available solar power, he emptied a large portion of his stored supplies into the now empty rooms of the 6th and 5th floors. He filled them with long shelf life and non-perishable items, stocked freezers with meat, and arranged appliances and equipment, anything that didn't absolutely need the perfect stasis of the White Room. With the 6th and 5th floors dealt with, John decided to do a secondary sweep through the rooms of the other floors. This time, he wasn't clearing bodies, he was checking for anything that could be used against him or might be of value, having only focused on zombies and corpses the first time. The rooms he had marked during the initial clearance, which had contained the dead, were also thoroughly disinfected. As for the basement floor of the main building, he put it through the same rigorous clearing and cleaning process as the top 2 floors, then used a quarter of the space to create a primary storage area for resident supplies, leaving the rest as a clean slate for the future. With a significant amount of space reclaimed in his pocket dimension and the core of the main building cleared, secured, and safe, John shut and locked the other residential buildings, marking them for later inspection and preparation. Then, finally, he started mapping out locations for his next rounds of scavenging. The next day, he stepped out. Traveling by foot was still a pain, but it was better than drawing a horde. After ensuring the base was secure and could be monitored remotely, he set out. His first target was a hardware store. He gathered enough high-grade electrical wire and fencing materials to line the top of the community walls. Storing it all in the White Room, he realized moving and constructing things inside the space was far easier. Back at the base, he assembled the electrified fence within the White Room, then, over several nights of back and forth travel, installed it on the walls piece by piece, connecting it to the solar grid. He used other trips to stockpile more construction materials. During his initial sweeps, he had discovered several low, utilitarian buildings tucked behind the residential towers, a maintenance shed for tools, a small equipment garage for vehicles, a greenhouse, and, most importantly, 2 large, temporarily built warehouses. It seemed the developers had been planning an expansion before the collapse. These previously overlooked warehouses, with their vast, empty floors, now served as his primary storage yards. He cleared them out, keeping anything usable and safely disposing of the rest, then began filling them with organized mountains of lumber, rebar, bags of concrete, and hardware. Not every trip was without incident. He encountered wandering zombies constantly, but John cut them down with practiced ease. Over time, the area immediately around his base began to have fewer and fewer infected. Now it was time to address the supermarkets. Not wanting to deplete his existing supplies, John resumed targeting supermarkets, but with a more selective approach. The ones that had already been broken into and ravaged he left alone. He still had the vast, preserved reserves of the White Room as an ultimate fallback. Instead, he focused on supermarkets that appeared untouched, taking only perfectly sealed goods that showed no signs of tampering or spoilage. During this time, he kept up with the radio. Broadcasts spoke of increasingly dire situations, no sign of a cure, but mentioned other bases being established, a good sign. However, reports also came in of bases being overrun from the inside or by external hordes. This made John think. What would he do if a large horde attacked his base? After some thought, he decided he would need heavier weaponry, machine guns, mortars, perhaps even turrets that could be manually operated. The base would also need a second, stronger layer of walls beyond the original. He considered raiding another military base, but what were the chances the next one would be deserted? For now, he would focus on the nearby areas. After raiding all the nearby supermarkets he could find, John had also filled 3/4 of the main building's basement with supplies, adding more freezers and proper storage containers. He planned to visit another bottled water plant, but the nearest one was some distance away. He had intended to mark off plots for open-air farming but remembered the red rain. Instead, he decided to convert the existing greenhouse for growing crops. If they needed to scale up later, he could always convert a floor or two of one of the vacant buildings. For now, he was living a wary version of the dream in the apocalypse. The next task was obtaining the right seeds. On the way to get seeds for planting, John passed a police station. He needed more guns, though he knew they wouldn't have the heavy weapons he wanted. Still, he could take a look. As he stood outside, deciding whether to get the seeds first or check the station, he noticed a flash of light, a reflection, as if someone was trying to signal him. John immediately became alert and looked up. There, in a second-story window of the police station, was a person using a mirror to catch his attention. He usually slipped by unnoticed, but this time, someone had seen the man in the black suit first. John waved to signal he'd seen them. The person in the window began mouthing words, but without sound. John had to guess. It seemed to be about helping zombies. A dark joke flashed in his mind: shouldn't I be asking the police for help? But he pushed it aside. He signaled back that he understood. This could mean he had a potential security team, depending on how many were inside. He drew his blades and started clearing a path, dropping bodies with the ruthless efficiency he'd honed. It didn't take long to reach the room he'd seen the person in. He knocked on the door. Unsure what to say, he kept it simple. "Hello. It's the person from downstairs. Do you need help?" He heard movement, then the door opened. A woman in a police uniform stepped out. "Yes. I'm Kate. Please, come in before they come back." Seeing they were just survivors, John remained cautious, ready to react if needed. "The immediate zombies have been cleared out," he said. "Could you open the door fully so I can see the room?" Kate complied. "Sure. There are 5 of us in total." John looked inside. It was true. 5 people, all in various states of uniform, looked back at him, each paler and more worn than the last. He entered and closed the door behind him. They introduced themselves: Kate, Melissa, Joseph, David, and Katie. All were rookie officers, trapped when the station was overrun. After the introductions, one of them, David, asked, "Are you special forces?" "Government." John shook his head. "No. Just a civilian. But I have a secure place. I can offer you shelter." They exchanged hopeful glances. "Do you have any water on you?" Melissa asked, her voice dry. John did, but he wasn't about to reveal the white room. "I have plenty at my base." "How far?" Katie asked, perking up. "About 30 minutes on foot, if we're careful." Drained but desperate, they agreed to go. As a precaution, John had them leave their service weapons in the room. He'd retrieve them later. He led them outside, guiding them back to Castleview Haven and cutting down any wandering zombies along the way with only his blades, keeping his abilities hidden. Upon reaching the community, he assigned them rooms on the 4th floor of the main building, near the now secured stairwell to the 5th floor. They quickly noticed the profound emptiness. "Are we the only ones here?" Kate asked. "For now," John said. "I only recently cleared this place. The 6th floor, 5th floor, and basement of this building are off limits. For now, get cleaned up, there's still running water." In his mind, he added a private caveat: access to the basement could be a later reward, depending on how they behave. He brought them food and water from the basement, deciding to use up the supplies that were already outside the white room. After they ate, he laid out the new reality. "You'll have tasks starting tomorrow. Rest today." Kate started to ask another question, but John cut her off gently but firmly. "Don't ask too many questions. Not yet." He left them to settle in. That same afternoon, John went back out to finish his original task, getting seeds. While he was at it, he realized the group had arrived with nothing. He raided a clothing store for basic attire and a pharmacy for toiletries, making a point to gather feminine products. It was a practical, if slightly awkward, necessity. He returned late, storing the new supplies in the organized basement. The next day, he met with his new neighbors. He had reconsidered overnight. Instead of just delivering supplies, he would bring them to the source. It was a test. He wanted to see how they would react to seeing the stockpile, and if the temptation to take more, or to plot against the one man guarding it, would flicker in their eyes. He brought them down to the basement. "This area remains off limits unless I bring you down," he said. "For now, you can each take a limited allotment: clothes, toiletries, food. Enough to survive, not to indulge. Choose carefully." They were stunned by the stockpile. How did you get all this?" Joseph breathed. John's expression didn't change. "Don't worry about the how. After you've collected your supplies, your task is farming. We'll start with the existing greenhouse. I'll switch you to security when we have more people, but for now, this is your job." They agreed, grateful for the structure and safety. A peaceful rhythm began. John, however, was already planning the next layer of defense, a secondary wall, and knew he needed heavier weapons. But first, he watched his new neighbors. He monitored them through the surveillance system, ensuring they posed no threat. About a week later, just as John was preparing to leave for another supply run, movement on the perimeter cameras caught his eye. A family of 4, a man, a pregnant woman, and a young boy, was cautiously approaching the main gate. They knocked softly, terrified of attracting attention. John met them at the gate. The man introduced himself as Michael, his pregnant wife as Clara, and their young son as Leo. Their story was a common one: fleeing, desperate, seeking solid walls. He checked them for bites or scratches, then isolated them in a ground-floor room near the gate for 30 minutes. He used that time to brief Kate and the others over the radio, letting them know about the new arrivals and the procedure. After the time passed with no signs of change, he processed them in. He gave them a room on the 4th floor with good soundproofing, thinking ahead to the coming baby. A new logistical problem presented itself. He'd raided countless supermarkets but had always ignored the aisles for baby supplies, diapers, formula, tiny clothes. It had never crossed his mind. Now, he made a mental note: another specialized scavenging run was in his future. He provided the family with general supplies and introduced them to the others. Only Michael was fit for heavy work, so John added him to the farming detail. With the community beginning to take shape, John finally prepared for his trip to the next military base. He informed everyone he'd be gone for a while and left them a set of walkie-talkies on a private channel. 3 of the original officers wanted to come along to look for their families and Kate just wanted to tag along, but John decided against it. Moving in a group was too risky. He fought best alone. Instead, he addressed the 3 officers. "I have drones. Use them to search from here. If you find your families, mark the location. If it's near my route, I'll try to assist on my way back. If not, we plan a proper rescue after I return. Do not go out yourselves." To Kate, he simply said, "I need you here, managing security." After everything was set in the base, John headed out. 3 days into his journey, his binoculars revealed a massive, dense horde blocking the most direct route, too many to fight or slip past. He considered a long detour, but a darker idea took hold: this was a chance to thin a major threat. He found a straight road leading toward the pack and retreated into the White Room to prepare a gasoline tanker, rigging it to spill. But then he hesitated. What if there are people in those buildings? A firestorm in a residential area was untenable. Checking his map, he saw a park on the other side of the horde. But it was useless. The horde itself was the impassable wall. Frustrated, he chose to reroute. It took several more days of careful travel, cutting down stragglers, to circle around the massive gathering. When he finally reached the opposite side, he found an open field. This was the place. He set a trap. He took 2 gasoline tankers from the White Room and placed them a good distance apart in the field. He set up loudspeakers beside each and even spread a thin layer of gasoline on the surrounding grass. Then he found a vantage point on a nearby 2-story building and unpacked a heavy machine gun. He started music blaring from the first speaker. The horde stirred and began to shuffle toward the noise. When a critical mass was near the first tanker, John opened fire. Sparks flew. The first tanker erupted in a fireball, engulfing dozens. Immediately, he activated the second speaker, splitting the horde's attention. Chaos reigned. Burning figures stumbled. Others turned toward the new sound or toward the source of the gunfire. John ducked as debris from the first explosion rattled his building. When he looked up, a dense pack was already charging his position. He needed to detonate the second tanker fast. He threw a pack of raw meat from the White Room onto the ground between him and the charging zombies, then tossed 2 grenades after it. The diversion worked for a second. He swung the machine gun and poured fire into the second tanker. It ignited with a ground-shaking boom, sending another wave of flame through the ranks. But the gunfire had pinned him as the source. A river of undead was now focused on his building. He stored the machine gun and ran. The structure began to shake as bodies slammed into its supports. He reached the roof's edge and jumped. Instead of hitting the ground, he focused and vanished into the White Room midair. He stumbled onto the featureless floor, the impact of the short fall still jarring his knees. Through his 30-foot sense, he felt the violent tremor as the building he'd just left collapsed under the tide. His exit point was now a void over a scene of chaos. A few feet below it lay only rubble and a seething mass of bodies. He was stuck, forced to wait until they lost interest and wandered away, leaving a patch of ground clear enough to land on. Hours later, the area finally cleared enough for a safe exit. He returned to the outside world, finishing the drop and rolling to absorb the impact. The field was a charred, smoldering ruin of twisted metal and ash. He'd wiped out maybe 70% of the horde. It was a victory, but a costly one in time and resources. He couldn't afford to burn tankers on every horde. He needed dedicated, heavy weapons. 10 days later, weary but determined, he finally sighted the military base. The sound of heavy gunfire echoed in the distance. They were still active. He approached with extreme caution, not wanting to catch a stray bullet. As he got closer, the gunfire became sporadic and fading. Through his binoculars, he saw the final stages of the base's fall. A large crowd of zombies was still pressing against the outer fences, but beyond them, inside the compound, another seething mass was converging on a last defensive position, a handful of soldiers making a doomed final stand. Deciding to help, John retrieved the tank he'd previously obtained from his White Room. He'd spent enough time with the manuals during his reorganizing to grasp the basics of loading and firing it. He positioned the tank and fired shell after shell into the densely packed crowd. The explosions tore through them, but it was like stirring a hornet's nest. Zombies began to break off and stream toward his position. He was so focused on the distant crowd that he didn't notice the ones that had flanked him until the tank started rocking, claws scraping at the hull. He popped the hatch and scrambled out, only to see dozens more closing in from the side. Frustration boiled over. He drew his blades and moved in a furious blur, cutting, vanishing, reappearing, dropping grenades as he went. He spent less and less time in the White Room, popping back the instant his exit point was clear, a whirling dervish of lethal motion until he'd carved a path out of the encirclement and could sprint away. While running, he realized the base had fallen completely silent. No more defensive fire. He used noisemakers and meat to divert the zombies still on his tail, eventually losing them. When he infiltrated the base, it was a charnel house. Fresh bodies in uniform lay torn apart. To clear space, he attached meat and a speaker to a drone, luring the remaining zombies away from the central buildings. After they were gone, he called out cautiously, "Hello. Is anyone alive? Friendly here." No answer but the wind. He made for the armory, this time targeting the heavy weapons, belt-fed machine guns, rocket launchers, mortars, and the precious .50 caliber heavy machine guns, turret guns, he could mount on walls. He was loading crates when he heard a sound, a faint, stifled whimper. Blades ready, he approached the noise, calling out softly. "Hello. Can you hear me?" He found her in a supply closet, a woman in a medic's uniform, curled in on herself. She looked up, eyes wide with shock. "Are you reinforcements?" she whispered. "No," John said, lowering his blades. "I'm the leader of a community. A civilian." The woman, she gave her name as Belle, broke down, sobbing. "I didn't sign up for this. I'm a medic. I treat people. She gathered herself with a visible effort. The zombies outside. Lured away or dead for now, John said. Are you the only one? I don't know, she admitted. He was about to ask her to help him find the communications room to send a message throughout the base when the sound of propeller engines coughed, then roared to life. They rushed outside to see a handful of other survivors, figures in torn uniforms and lab coats, sprinting across the tarmac towards two waiting helicopters, their rotors whipping up a storm of dust and debris. It was a desperate, last-minute evacuation. Bell looked from the escaping survivors to John. Aren't you going? John shook his head. My path's different. And it's a long walk back through infected territory. You should go. This is your chance. She hesitated, watching the choppers begin to lift. You came here alone. Alone. As the helicopters rose into the gray sky, Bell made her choice. I'll stay with you. John accepted Bell's choice with a nod. All right. But we need to move. That noise will draw everything for miles. He hadn't gotten a replacement tank, but he'd secured the heavy weapons. To explain the haul to Bell, he needed plausible cover. That first night, after she fell into an exhausted sleep, he acted. He returned to the overrun base alone. Using his ability to move silently and store items instantly, he conducted a final, ruthless scavenging run. He found a serviceable military trailer, loaded it with crates of the heaviest weapons, machine guns, mortars, rockets, and even managed to retrieve an intact tank from a secondary motor pool, storing it in the White Room. He then towed the loaded trailer back to their campsite, leaving it hitched to a truck just as the sky began to lighten. When Bell woke the next morning, she found John preparing the truck, the trailer hitched and laden behind it. I did a final sweep at first light, he explained. We can't leave this behind. She accepted the story without question. After a quick meal, they set out, the heavy trailer rolling behind them. They took a long, circuitous route back, sticking to country roads and avoiding population centers. The journey took over a week. Bell was quiet, traumatized but resilient. John watched her, assessing her usefulness. A medic was a valuable asset. When Castleview Haven's walls finally came into view, Bell stared. This is your base. Yes, John said simply. Since she had been with him for days, he performed only a quick, visual security check at the gate instead of the full isolation procedure. Once cleared, he brought her in and introduced her to Kate and the others. The community had grown slightly in his absence, 10 more survivors had found their way to the gates and been processed in. John directed the truck and trailer into the secured parking garage and closed the door behind them before anyone could get a close look at the load. It was better if the community didn't know the full extent of the arsenal. That way, he could produce extra weapons from the space later without raising suspicion. He then went back and helped Bell and the other newcomers settle, assigning rooms and distributing a basic supply kit. The next day, he began a skills assessment. Among the new arrivals were 2 former cooks and a man who knew how to operate an excavator. John stored that information away. He assigned the cooks to the kitchen. He took the excavator operator, a man named Mark, aside. Your skill is noted, John said. I'll have a task for you when the time is right. After resting for a few days and checking on the community, John set out again, scouting different construction sites. At one, he found a gold mine, a heavy-duty excavator, a tractor, and a bulldozer, the essential machinery for building a serious wall. Knowing he couldn't operate them himself and needing a believable cover for transporting them, he returned to the base and called on Mark. Together, they went back to the site. The process was slow and noisy. Mark operated each machine in turn, driving them out one by one, while John moved ahead on foot as a scout and rearguard, his blades constantly dealing with the zombies drawn by the racket. It took several tense hours to move the convoy the relatively short distance back to Castleview Haven, where John directed Mark to park them in the secured vehicle yard. The arrival of 3 massive pieces of equipment could not go unnoticed. The rumble of diesel engines and the sheer sight of them rolling through the gate drew everyone out. Seeing the questions on their faces, John gathered the community. I've seen the hordes out there, he said, his voice flat and factual over the idle of the engines. They're getting bigger, denser. One good push could overwhelm what we have. So, we're building another wall. A bigger one. That's what these are for, John said. Construction starts soon. Before the first shovel broke ground, John had more prep work. He visited several more hardware stores, clearing their aisles of lumber, concrete, rebar, wiring, and other building supplies. John even found and stored a cement truck, which he later deposited along with a mountain of supplies, filling the secured warehouses in the back of the community to near capacity. He filled 2 large trailers to the brim with building supplies, parking them just outside the community's perimeter for a final, dramatic entrance. He also, finally, visited a baby supply store. It was untouched. No one had thought to loot it. Apparently, no one except him. John stood in the silent aisle, surrounded by formula, diapers, bottles, tiny clothes, and all sorts of baby items. For a brief moment, he questioned the trajectory of his life. What am I doing? He shook it off and cleared the shelves of everything unexpired and unspoiled. He probably wouldn't have thought to do something like this until that pregnant woman, Clara, came along. He stored his haul in the white room and retrieved the first building material supply trailer, driving it through the gate to a designated yard. The second trailer run, however, did not go as planned. Half a mile from the community, straight ahead, he spotted a crowd of people, not too large, but moving in his direction. They spotted him at the same moment. Arms waved. Voices called out, desperate and hopeful. John didn't stop. He drove through the gate, stopped the truck, and jumped down. Instead of going back out immediately, he pulled out his tablet and checked the camera feed, watching their movements. Were they hostile? Organized? A threat? He also alerted his security team to stand by. After a few minutes of observation, seeing no weapons or aggressive behavior, he opened the gate and walked out to meet them. There were 23 of them. Their story, pieced together through overlapping accounts, was simple: they had seen him. On his long journey back from the military base, driving that trailer through the outskirts, dozens of eyes had spotted the moving fortress on wheels and followed its trail. Some had been alone, others in small clusters. They met on the road, gravitating toward the same destination, until they became a small, desperate caravan. John put them through the full security process: pat-downs, bite checks, the 30-minute isolation. When they were cleared, he assigned them to the remaining rooms and distributed basic supplies. Later, after parking the second building supplies trailer next to the first one, John went to the main apartment basement and unloaded the baby haul. Diapers, formula, bottles, creams, portable cribs, everything he'd taken from the baby store. He set them aside in a clean, dry corner. Then he called Clara and Michael down. Usually, only specific people were granted basement access, but John wasn't about to guess which supplies a pregnant woman actually needed. He had them pick out everything themselves. They stared at the organized stacks, the sheer volume of it, and for a moment, neither spoke. "This is..." Michael started, then stopped. Clara ran her fingers over a sealed package of onesies, her expression somewhere between disbelief and overwhelming relief. "I was so worried," she said quietly. "Almost due, and I just kept thinking about all the things we didn't have." She looked up at John. Now it's not a problem anymore." They thanked him. Multiple times. John nodded once and said nothing, but he noted the weight of it. The community was growing faster now. With 23 new residents, the old system of individuals fetching their own rations became impractical. John instituted a new protocol: 3 communal meals a day, prepared by the cooks, served in the clubhouse. Water, though plentiful, was metered, not out of scarcity, but principle. Waste was not tolerated. He also began turning over a new problem in his mind: livestock. Fresh eggs, milk, meat. But he'd seen almost no animals since the outbreak. Those that survived had likely gone silent or been devoured. If he wanted to raise them, he'd need soundproofed spaces, controlled environments. And there was the larger, unanswered question: could animals carry the virus? Another project. Another layer of complexity. For now, the wall came first. John gained 4 additional construction workers from the last large group, along with others who had the build to help. He also implemented a long-overdue system, a formal community registry. From now on, every new arrival would be processed through it: name, photograph, assigned room, known skills, and current tasks. It was basic, recorded on a high-end tablet but scalable. He could upgrade it later if needed. Next, he tackled communication. John remembered the routers and network equipment he'd hoarded. With the base running on solar, there was no reason to rely solely on radios and runners. He set up a closed, encrypted local Wi-Fi network, no internet, just a community internet. Before the collapse, he'd downloaded a few offline messaging apps out of curiosity. Now he installed one on every community-issued device, and on any personal devices residents still carried. Anyone connected to the network could message each other instantly. It wasn't the old world, but it was close enough. With a proper workforce now assembled and the infrastructure taking shape, the first crews finally broke ground on the wall's foundation. While construction moved forward, John remained on standby. Drones were still airborne, scanning wider territory for threats. And the security team, under his watchful guard, began gaining real experience, not just drills but actual takedowns. They were learning to fight the dead, one encounter at a time. During this period of intense work, something else developed. Late one night, Kate came to his 6th-floor command center under the pretext of discussing security. One thing led to another. John, who had long suppressed any personal desires, found the offer, and the uncomplicated understanding in Kate's eyes, to be a welcome pressure valve. It became a recurring, discreet arrangement. Simple. Mutual. No strings. A few weeks into this new normal, one of the original officers, David, approached him. Using the drone John had provided, he'd spent days, then weeks, tracking down his wife and son. They weren't at home. They'd fled early, bouncing between relatives, leaving David to methodically check each location through the drone's camera. Finally, at a cousin's house on the other side of the city, he spotted them through a second-story window, still alive, still holding out. He'd managed to drop them food and a note. "I need to get them," David said, his voice tight with hope. John nodded. "We'll go." He, Kate, and David made the journey. The extraction was tense but smooth. John brought the family back, processed them through isolation, and integrated them into the community. The rescue was a visible victory, solidifying John's role as protector. The rhythm of the base continued: farming, construction, security drills, and John's occasional, secretive supply runs. He'd stocked up on pharmacy goods before the collapse, but now, with the old world dead, everything was free. He paid the untouched pharmacies another visit, then moved on to hospitals, clearing their shelves of anything still usable. He was a ghost during the day, a provider at night, and a leader by default. Then, the sky warned them again. Dark, reddish clouds gathered on the horizon. John immediately shifted priorities. He'd marked several water treatment plants on his map long ago but never got around to visiting them. The red rain had slipped his mind. Now he made up for lost time. He hit 2 plants in rapid succession, hoarding tons of sealed water. He also replenished his stock of fuel tankers, replacing the ones he'd detonated and adding an extra for good measure. The rain began the day after he finished, a downpour of thick, red droplets. Everyone was ordered indoors. John retreated to his command center, watching the external cameras. The zombies on screen went into the same frenzied, mindless rage he'd seen before. But then, on a camera feed from a distant supermarket where he'd left a sensor, he witnessed something new. The people who had been surviving there had run out of water. In their desperation, they drank the red rain. John fast-forwarded through the stored footage. The transformation was swift and horrific: cold sweats, stomach cramps, convulsions, and within 10 minutes, a ravenous reanimation. They hadn't been bitten. The rain itself was a vector. He was processing this when a new alarm chimed, a motion sensor at the main gate. He switched the view. 3 figures were slamming into the heavy metal gate. Not mindlessly. Rhythmically. Coordinated. Bang, bang, bang. Panic spread through the community's group channel. John's voice cut through it, calm and hard. "Stay inside. Do not approach the windows." He grabbed a high-powered sniper rifle from his private stash, one he hadn't had much time to practice with, but he had to try. He took position at a fortified 3rd-floor window. Through the scope, he confirmed they were zombies. But their movements were different, less shambling, more predatory. They kept ramming the gate, again and again. John took a breath, aimed for the head of the one in the lead, and fired. The suppressed crack echoed in the room. The shot tore through the thing's jaw, snapping its head back. It staggered, then straightened, a gaping hole where its mouth had been. It looked around, as if confused, then focused back on the gate with renewed fury. The second zombie behind the one that got hit started hiding behind a pillar, peeking out and looking around. John had to double-check. He zoomed in, scanned their faces, their torn clothing, their decay. After a long moment, he lowered the scope slightly. They were zombies. No doubt about it. But they shouldn't be able to do that. A cold knot formed in John's stomach. They're learning. He fired again, this time aiming for the head of another one. The shot went wide, tore clean through its arm instead. The zombie barely reacted, already ducking behind the pillar with its injured companion. The one zombie that managed not to get shot saw the muzzle flash. It let out a guttural growl toward John's position, then scrambled back behind the stone pillar to block itself from John's view. They weren't just frenzied. They were adaptive. "I'm going out to contain this," John announced over the radio. "Security teams, stand by at the interior barricades. Do not fire unless one gets inside." He armored up. His combat suit was already waterproof, but he added an extra layer beneath it anyway, not because he needed to, but because he couldn't afford to take the risk. By the time he reached the garage and an armored truck, the three zombies were again pounding the gate in unison, a terrible, metronomic drumbeat of siege. He sped forward, radioing for the gate to be opened just enough. As it slid open, the three charged. Two were bowled over by the truck's grill, sent flying backwards. The third dodged to the side. It growled furiously and was ready to charge, then a shot rang out from the wall. A security guard with a rifle. The round punched through the zombie's chest, knocking it down. It tried to get up, but another shot hit, then another, until its brain was torn through. John slammed the truck into park and burst out, a pistol with a silencer in his hand. The two on the ground were already rising. He fired, at their heads, but they dodged. The movements were clumsy, desperate, but they were trying. After several shots missed their heads, John adjusted mid-battle and aimed lower. They weren't expecting that. He crippled the second zombie's mobility, one leg buckling beneath it. At the same time, the third one charged. John ducked under, pivoted, and sliced its legs out from under it with his blade. He didn't kill them. Not right away. Instead, he cut off their arms and legs, one by one, methodical and efficient. He gagged them with duct tape before staking them down with rebar driven deep into the mud. "Let's see what the rain does to you two," he muttered, a grim experiment taking shape in his mind. The third one, the one that had been killed inside, he dragged outside the gate and tossed aside. He returned inside, sealed the gate, and spent the next few hours watching them through the cameras. The red rain fell. The zombies writhed and strained against their bonds, but showed no further changes. No increased intelligence, no new abilities. Just the same feral, trapped aggression. After several hours, satisfied, John went back out and ended them with precise blade strokes to the brain. John carried the bodies to a pit beyond the wall after the rain stopped. Someone in the community, trying to lighten the mood, joked about them having crystals in their heads. John checked. They did not. He burned the bodies. Standing before the assembled community the next day, the scorched earth at his back, John laid out the new, stark reality. The rain is poison. It can turn you. And the infected, they're changing. Getting smarter in small ways. The walls we have aren't enough anymore. He pointed to the machinery, sitting silent. We're building up our defenses and arming our walls. We will not be at these creatures' mercy.